Why did only 1 in every 5 members of high-altitude FLAK crews survived the Pacific War? How did a massive anti-aircraft cannon transformed into the ultimate anti-tank sniper and coastal defense monster? How did it down hundreds of Allied bombers over the vast expanses of the Pacific? And why was its fire control system disturbingly ahead of its time when it first appeared? You're going to hear all that and more through the intense story of the infamous Japanese 88mm Type 99 cannon. Let's begin. In the early 1930s, the Empire of Japan was rearming with increasing speed. Despite international naval treaties and diplomatic pressure, Japanese military engineers were secretly pushing the limits of artillery and heavy weaponry. World War I had made it abundantly clear that air power was evolving fast. By the mid-1930s, the threat was no longer just low-flying reconnaissance planes or biplane dogfighters. New strategic bombers showed the potential of flying at altitudes that put them completely out of reach of light anti-aircraft guns and small arms.
While carrying payloads heavy enough to flatten entire industrial centers and military bases, Japanese strategists were thinking ahead, and they wanted a formidable high-altitude weapon to shield their empire from this rising threat. Engineers at the Osaka Army Arsenal were tasked with developing a high-velocity, heavy cannon with extremely demanding requirements. Through extensive testing and multiple trial iterations, they created what would become known as the 88mm Type 99 anti-aircraft gun. The weapon was engineered to fire heavy, high-velocity, time-fused shells set to detonate at precise altitudes, showering enemy bomber formations with dense clusters of lethal metal fragments. A direct hit could instantly obliterate any aircraft of the era, while near misses were more than enough to shred wings, puncture fuel lines, disable engines, or kill the flight crew, making it impossible for the plane to stay airborne. It was extraordinarily accurate and powerful.
Thanks to a heavy cruciform carriage, the gun could be rapidly elevated from -5 degrees to +85 degrees and rotated a full 360 degrees to track fast-moving targets from any direction. That wide range of elevation also meant it could be lowered horizontally to engage ground and sea targets, a capability that unexpectedly gave it a terrifying secondary role, but we'll come to that in a second. Weighing nearly 6.5 tons, the Type 99 required a well-trained 9-man crew and was designed to be towed by heavy motor tractors, providing the mobility needed for rapid deployment across key island garrisons. In an emergency, an experienced crew could unlimber and fire the gun directly from its wheels in just a few minutes. The grim reality, however, was that as the war progressed and the tide turned decisively against Japan, these FLAK crews were increasingly made up of elderly reservists, wounded soldiers returning from the front, young conscripts, and civilian auxiliaries. Over 1 million personnel were eventually serving in the anti-aircraft defense arm of the imperial forces, representing nearly a third of their total home defense strength. Much like the most famous artillery pieces of the era, what made this cannon truly ingenious was the sophisticated ecosystem built around it to maximize its combat effectiveness. At the time of its design, engineers didn't fully realize that they had created arguably one of the most versatile and feared heavy guns of the Pacific War. It didn't take long for the weapon to see action. Early models were deployed during the border conflicts in Manchuria and mainland China for combat testing. The operational results immediately caught the attention of the Imperial High Command, and the 88mm was quickly designated as their premier heavy anti-aircraft system. But no one yet realized its full potential or how many roles it would adopt on unpredictable battlefields. Facing entrenched positions and armored cars in China, commanders lowered the barrels of the 88s to engage anything in sight. The gun immediately proved that besides shooting down planes, it could obliterate concrete bunkers, wipe out infantry positions, and completely dismantle enemy armored vehicles.
Tanks of the early 1930s had barely enough armor to stop small arms fire, so a direct hit from a high-velocity anti-aircraft shell was catastrophic. When global war erupted in late 1941, Japan fielded thousands of these heavy guns across mainland facilities and island chains. Realizing the strategic necessity of the weapon, production was scaled up, and specialized armor-piercing rounds were mass-produced alongside time-fused anti-aircraft shells. As the war escalated, the gun underwent continuous refinement. Upgraded variants received longer multi-section barrels for easier field replacement, reinforced cruciform mounts for faster setup, steel gun shields to protect the crew from strafing and shrapnel, and improved ergonomic handwheels for faster manual tracking. The core of its notorious anti-aircraft effectiveness, however, lay in its highly sophisticated central fire control system. This was a complex mechanical analog computer that, when coupled with long-range optical rangefinders, sound locating devices, and early radar units, automatically calculated target speed, altitude, and wind resistance. It then fed real-time tracking data directly to every gun in the battery.
A central command team tracked incoming bomber formations, determined their flight path, and aimed multiple 88s at a predicted interception point. They had to execute these mathematical calculations in seconds, as a shell could take up to 20 seconds or more to reach higher altitudes. When the bombers arrived at that exact point in the sky, the timed fuses detonated simultaneously, creating a wall of flying shrapnel. Unlike the Allies, who successfully developed and deployed advanced radio proximity fuses, keeping them a closely guarded secret throughout the war, Japan failed to field effective proximity fuses in mass numbers. They remained dependent on mechanical time fuses, which meant lower overall efficiency, since shells often exploded slightly too early or overshot the target. Early in the conflict, it took an average of 3,000 shells to bring down a single high-altitude bomber. By the end of the war, as Allies deployed heavy electronic radio jammers and window chaff, that number jumped to over 12,000 shells per kill.
Still, the sheer volume of high-explosive fire put out by a multi-gun battery guaranteed that many Allied bombers never made it back to their island airfields or aircraft carriers. With a muzzle velocity exceeding 2,600 feet per second and an effective vertical reach of over 28,000 feet, the Type 99 could easily reach high-altitude B-17s and B-24s. The 88mm shell weighed roughly 9 kilograms, carrying a heavy explosive core encased in thick steel designed to shatter into thousands of razor-sharp fragments upon detonation. The signature black smoke clouds in the sky marked explosions that sent up to 8,000 high-speed shrapnel pieces spraying outward in a 12-meter lethal radius. Because bombers relied on thin aluminum skin, with armor plating concentrated only around critical pilot seats and engines, flak fragments easily tore through fuselages, severing hydraulic lines, igniting fuel tanks, and wounding airmen. So how did this high-altitude anti-aircraft gun become a feared anti-tank sniper?
During the ferocious island-hopping campaigns in the South Pacific, Japanese forces encountered heavily armored Allied tanks like the M4 Sherman and heavy amphibious landing craft that standard 37mm and 47mm Japanese anti-tank guns simply could not penetrate. In desperation, commanders lowered the massive barrels of their 88mm batteries to engage advancing armor head-on. The results were devastating. The extreme muzzle velocity, flat trajectory, and high-powered optical sights made it the ultimate tank killer. At ranges exceeding 2 kilometers, far beyond the effective return fire range of enemy armor, an 88mm armor-piercing round could punch straight through over 100 millimeters of solid steel armor, causing internal explosions that instantly destroyed the target. Recognizing both the gun's lethal firepower and the extreme vulnerability of its open-air crews to naval bombardment, artillery strikes, and infantry snipers, Japanese engineers adapted the mechanism into specialized static coastal mounts and heavy anti-tank emplacements. They created heavily fortified positions where the gun's devastating range could lock down entire beachheads and naval channels.
By 1944, as the Allies initiated a relentless 24-hour bombing campaign against Japanese island airfields and home industry, FLAK crews faced unprecedented danger. Allied bombers began dropping specialized cluster bombs and FLAK suppression munitions designed to burst directly over gun pits and shred the crews. Fighter bombers executed low-level strafing runs at high speed, targeting the exposed crews with heavy machine guns and rockets. Casualty rates among heavy FLAK batteries skyrocketed to between 50.
These heavy concrete emplacements featured walls up to 3 meters thick, capable of withstanding direct hits from 500-kilogram aerial bombs and heavy naval artillery. These multi-story fortresses housed ammunition magazines, field hospitals, command centers, and shelter areas for personnel. Armed with twin-mounted heavy cannons supported by 88s and rapid-fire 25mm automatic guns for low-altitude defense, these fortified strongholds possessed immense firepower. During the final amphibious assaults on islands like Okinawa and the naval blockade of the mainland, these concrete gun emplacements became last-stand fortresses. Cut off from supply lines and surrounded by enemy forces, the surviving FLAK crews fought from within their concrete bunkers until their ammunition was completely exhausted, making these positions some of the very last to fall in the Pacific War.